Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.
Welcome to the Wizard of Odd, episode 15 with Bryan Lahr, entitled Practitioners. Also welcome to our special guest, Brother Jim. Well met.
Good morning, everybody. How's the world for you guys these days?
That was rather synchronistic.
I'm compressing all of the videos I just made, and I've got them in squeeze right now, and like one just finished up exactly. Like I have the kind of feeling that's the way the day is going to roll. It's episode 15. That's my soul number. It should be pretty fun. So we're going to talk about my favorite thing to talk about, which is magic. And, when I first started off preparing for this, I first got into what are the magical definitions. I've gone through many over my life. And then breaking those up into the different practitioners that fall into those categories of magic. So as I delved in, it's such a complex subject, and there are so many overlapping areas that I want to just put the caveat out there that this is my own kind of like organization of it. There would probably be a lot of people that would disagree with it, but this is kind of how it's made sense for me. So, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what's the actual definition of magic, and of course you can't really discuss that topic without going to Crowley. And magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will, and that sounded really heady, and it's something that takes on new colors as I grow and progress, but it never really hit for me. That like the deep part of it. Another one that I kind of held for a long time is magic is neutral. It's neither good nor evil, and that's a subject that we'll discuss at length in a little bit. But people assign, that's black magic or that's white magic, but in reality, magic doesn't have a morality. And it's not assigning good or bad. It is an energy that's triggered by the intent of the person doing it, So that was, and I make this analogy a lot, a gun is not intrinsically good or bad. If it's protecting you, if it's getting you food, then you're using that for a good thing, But if you go out and rob somebody or shoot your ex-wife or whatever you want to do, that's another choice made by you. But the instrument used to do that is not intrinsically a good or bad, black or white kind of scenario. There are definitely branches of magic that, for my own assignment to those things, carry more dark energy or light energy, if you want to put it. But the overall concept of magic and using your energy or supernatural forces to create change in your life is neither good nor bad. There we go. Sorry about that. We're compressing files
It's
right now.
all part of the program.
Yes, exactly. But actually, the one that I have held on to for a long, long time is magic is the art that encompasses all arts. And that feels so comfortable and like a second skin to me when I think about it that way, because the actual practice of magic and acquiring abilities and dexterity with what you do with your energy is definitely an art form, and carries the same kind of, like, pretty much every art, like whether it's painting or music, and anything, sculpture, anything that you do like that, you're going to be not that good at it. And as you practice and practice and practice and continue to learn, you achieve a level where you're no longer thinking about the technique and you're only thinking about the art. It's like, Jim, you were, we've never had this discussion before, but I've been playing guitar for 50 years. And, the first 5 years of that time was pretty much playing scales and learning chords and music theory and how to read music. And a little bit after 5 years, you find yourself with your fingers have a muscle memory that are now attached to my feelings. And instead of thinking about, like, where are my fingers going and trying to do a riff, I'm only thinking about the music I want to make, and my fingers just do that. And magic's the same way. And also magic, I my entire life has been in the pursuit of creative endeavors of one kind or another. I'm deeply into art and the actual painting and design and drawing and music, and all of those things are expressions of that inner energy. And we'll talk about this later on too. There's one of my categories for magic is projective and receptive magic. And those things, I think you would, at the beginning of those things, you would put them into a receptive zone, because you really do open yourself up and reach up into that flow that goes around the world, the creative consciousness, and pull something down, and that's also an area where if you give the external entities a chance to speak through the energy that you're creating, especially when you're improvising or just sitting down and writing, or you get a feeling and you just want to start communicating that through music. I found that I've gotten so many messages, like really profound life messages for me through that process, and wound up in places I don't know that I would have gotten to that quickly with that. And certainly, one of my favorite art forms is shooting photography, and specifically using a Polaroid camera and mirrors, and opening up a little vortex doorway in the mirror. One of my longtime tools. And if you take the Polaroid and turn the flash off, so it's just kind of a long exposure thing, and you call some entity to come forth, and you take that Polaroid and push it into the mirror, or pull out as you're hitting the shutter button. That energy and movement allows for them to come through in just crazy ways. As a matter of fact, that technique saved my life at one point. I was under a serious attack, and my life was really in danger from some very, very bad people. And I started doing the mirror scenario, and man, I was getting these images that were like, holy, like I got myself in one of the pictures, and it looked like my throat was cut, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? So those messages up front kind of alerted me to some very bad stuff that was going on, and got to let me get prepared and deal with that. And also, like, to the flip side, I've shot many angels. The angels love to come through like that for me for some reason. And I've got a shot of the Archangel Michael that is one of my favorite images out of my entire life. So that concept of and back to the guitar scenario. I don't know how you feel about this, Jim, but I feel like magic is actually, or music is actually a magical instrument in and of itself. Like creating a really amazing song that, you know, transcends the intellect and goes right to feeling. I think that is a magical act. And you know, it is kind of a crazy thing for me that those things are connected and now one and the same. And I use my drawing and my, like, all of my paintings have a definite metaphysical bent, and they all reflect what I was learning at the time. You know, I'm such a visual person. Like, some people like to read and get things by words. Some people like to hear it. Man, I like to see it. And when I'm taking kind of concepts that are really new and foreign to me and trying to grok them and make them into some thing that I can grasp, I find that making art about that, man, really clarifies things for me and helps me focus that energy. Have you been playing a long time?
Yeah, I'm 35 in less than a month, and I started probably around 14, 15. Ironically, through a depression. Long story short, I was in middle school and basically started going through a clinical depression, just kind of existential. What the fuck am I here for? Just chemical imbalances, all sorts of weird shit. And I was led, I won't say by the spirit or anything, but my dad had an acoustic guitar in his closet, and I just went in there, grabbed it, started fiddling around. In a few days, I had some chords, and a few days after that, was into it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then my brother, he's actually a drummer. He's toured the country and stuff with bands, and he's a professional, I guess you could say, drummer. And that was right around, like, I got a guitar, and he got into, counteract what I was doing. I was like, get drums or whatever. But to quickly so yeah, I've been playing for a minute. That's why I'm really itching to get my guitar back. Like I said, from customs. It's in America now, but they're like, it's insane, the legalistic kind of paperwork to get things across borders, I guess. I never realized things that belong to me. But anyway, two things that kind of came to my mind when you were saying all this. Miles Davis, whom, I mean, I'm not like a jazz hound per se, but Sketches of Spain is one of my favorite albums of his. And he said something to the effect of, learn all the music theory you can. This is kind of in correspondence to both magic and music in particular, obviously, as he's a trumpeter. But he's like, learn all the theory, all the music theory you can, or theory of anything, and then forget it. Like, it becomes rote, it becomes second nature. But there is this kind of learning curve, like you were saying, at some point. And then there was another thing I was going to say, but I'm totally spacing on what it was. So let me gather my thoughts. But yes, I've been playing for a minute.
So every magical act is an act of creativity, and every creative act is an act of magic. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. And it was I remember what I was going to say, because you were saying something about music being the high. I mean, Beethoven was saying, music is the highest form of revelation or philosophy or whatever. It's like higher than philosophy. It's more than thought. It's vibratory. It's mathematical. It's ingrained in the Tao itself, it seems, with frequencies and ratios and Pythagorean kind of stuff. But this gets into the origin story of the Lord of the Rings universe with Tolkien in the Silmarillion. It's all a bunch of individuals kind of singing chords, and I don't remember if it's Melkor or what the name is, but like basically one of these beings start singing in discordant ways, and that's kind of this, fall from grace of the perfect triad or whatever the fuck is going on there. So even in that mythology, it kind of denotes music as being some kind of a fundament to reality, the harmony of the spheres, all that kind of stuff. Actually, Gustav Holst made a really good not album. I've heard it in album form. Pieces of music called "The Planets." If I don't know if you're familiar with that.
It's amazing. I love
Oh
that.
yeah, you get it. Yeah. That's where Star Wars, straight up, John Williams lifted the Darth Vader theme and all that Empire theme from Mars. Like that's just where it comes from.
That's so true.
So I don't know. I don't need to keep talking necessarily, but when you were talking at the beginning about like magic is a kind of everything and everything is magic and all this stuff, and how you were saying to the effect that like once you become kind of like at first you're kind of figuring things out and then you get to a flow state, it would seem, where you're just kind of creating. How do you look at that in correspondence, if at all? Maybe there is no correlation and I'm just projecting, to the kind of origins. We were talking a little about Fantasia and Gaia. By the way, I saw that YouTube graphic. That's phenomenal. That's amazing. A way to look at it.
That over the top. Here, let me share this with everybody. Actually, I'm a big fanatic about earthquakes and the way the seismic vibrations work around the world. And on YouTube, there is this guy. It's called Earthmaster, and he's got this this graphic that's a live 3D moving image of the world, and it's showing all of the seismic activity that's going on all over the globe in real time. It's up live all the time, but he also does shows like when there's like the big quake that happened out in Nevada and all the subsequent aftershocks and the other follow-up almost as big quake, and seeing how that happened was just amazing. And when the initial shock happened, and you see that, I actually was synchronistically on the site when that happened, and it's popping up in its little red thing. Really great visualizations of where it's happening. And the thing that I love the most about it is he's got this filter that overlays the fault lines all over the world on top of this image, and you're seeing where the quakes happen. And one of the things that he does a lot is like, okay, if there's a big quake over here and 100 miles 200 miles away there's another big quake over here, and aftershocks likely to show up here. And I was really kind of skeptical about that at first, but man, he is accurate so such a large percentage of the time. It's kind of mind-boggling to see where it's happening. And the other thing is seeing the relationship of it's like the astrology chart, right? You're always dealing with your own sun sign, but then the opposite sign on the other side of the chart has significant impact for you as well. And on this globe image, it's like, okay, there's a 6.0 in Japan, and you come back over here and it's on exactly the opposite side of the world, and another 6.5. So you see how it's like traveling. It's like blood veins in a way to me, and the way things flow and happen and what stops them. Like they're the place where this earthquake activity happened in Nevada. There's a number of large ancient calderas from volcanoes, and it was curious to see how a series of earthquakes leading up to that event were marching down that line in a flow, and then hit these areas where there were calderas and large geological infractions, and it stopped that flow and moved it in another direction. And now all the aftershocks are now following that fault line and going out. Really, really useful and super interesting way to look at that activity. And it has added a really great dimension of understanding to my my interest in that. So I'd love to share that again. It's an Earthmaster on YouTube. Yeah.
It's very cool. Just the quick thought I was asking about is we were talking about Fantasia kind of because of that guy's stuff, right? Because it shows very readily that we're kind of residents of Gaia and things happen beyond our cultural preferences, maybe one could say. And it's funny because I don't know how you look at it. I know Raphael's read the raw channel material, the Law of One stuffs, but it seems that there are levels. Okay, so this gets back to the question. It would be in early kind of evolutionary history in a certain paradigm, it's like a very material universe. There's a lot of cause and effect, not a whole lot of necessarily sentient animal life as we would know it, right, in 3D kind of Earth realms. And then you start seeing kind of domains of biospheres opening up and stuff. And now here we have the internet and a bunch of people, doing SpaceX and all this shit. Do you look at that as kind of like the conditions of the magic being set up slowly, like the 5-year kind of beginnings of it? I know there's a magic to, geology and all this kind of stuff, but it's kind of a more crude and rudimentary kind of situation. And by the time you get to like language and mammals with opposable thumbs and all this stuff, it's kind of, you're in the flow of the creation of the magic. Do you see what I'm kind of saying there?
I
I think you muted yourself.
Sorry. I see that as kind of the natural flow of like I said those fault lines look like veins. I kind of think about the earth being it is a living being, and I don't know that to my view, to call it magic is something that was put forth with intent. The world is just being. It's living and conduct, but it's not really affecting change in any outside way. There's forces affecting it outside in the universe and the solar flares and things that are happening to it that cause change, but it is not in it.
So you don't look at it as like a large magical working of like archonic forces that are beyond human comprehension, kind of working through longer time scales with the will that we couldn't perceive as such in our own, monkey minds or whatever.
At this moment in time, I would say I don't.
Word. Just that's what came to mind when we were talking about this, because it seems like to create the conditions of magic, you have to have intention, like you're saying, but there seems to be kind of a gathering of the forces or the elements of the organizational period, like the 5 years of the learning, and then you kind of kick into a flow state of stuff that wouldn't have been possible before. Now that the conditions are met, kind of like San mandalas of the Tibetans. It's like they create very kind of basic, a structure at first. It's like, here's the form, the space it's occurring. Now let's get into the nitty gritty, and then eventually they blow it away or whatever. But anyway,
well, there's always at the beginning. There's always acquiring technique of some kind in order to be able to express what's really inside you. Like if you have the most amazing guitar solo in your mind ever written, but you can't play scales yet, you're not going to have a lot of success being able
the translation's going to be problematic.
Yeah, and you're not going to express that, to the degree that you really felt it. You mentioned jazz. One of my favorite jazz guys is Miles Davis, and I think he was a wizard actually. And I don't know if you've ever listened to his album that was just colors, but like the song called Red and Blue. Amazing. And he's definitely channeling something from somewhere else. But that's because he has the chops and the muscle memory in his physical being to then translate. It's just like talking. When you're newborn, you can't form words, but as you learn and grow and you speak and you speak and you speak, when was the last time you thought about the shape your mouth was making when you were trying to say a word? You don't, because your muscle memory is such that whatever thought you have then gets translated to a physical action that puts that out into the world. And that's how I view that scenario.
I just looked up Miles Davis's chart. He's a Gemini with a Scorpio moon and a Gemini ascendant. So definitely channeling some deep magic with the moon, but also obviously mercurial, kind of intellectualizing it and playing around. I have not heard that Colors album, but when you said something about like the kind of like the architecture of like our mouth and throat, like it took a long time for the evolution of the human body to come to a place where we could articulate thoughts through a tongue and breath and all this stuff.
Very true, very true.
I'll send you a link at some point. I'm looking for it right now, but I think it's called Pink Trombone or something like that. And you can kind of, you'll enjoy this. You can kind of, put in a vowel and see in the mouth, like you can drag the tongue around and create different apertures of wind and different stuff. And you could just see how, the formation of language through the human larynx and tongue and all this shit, is very, very scientific.
It really is. I've had cause to kind of with the pandemic and the super focus on health and microscopic things and stuff. Our bodies really are miraculous machines. It's kind of crazy when you think about how complex we are and just the act of moving your arm, what really goes into that, electrical messages to specific muscles to
even the counterbalancing. So like when you want to lift an arm, certain other muscles are doing something so that can even be allowed,
right,
and the bone
right,
is the structure for it. And it's nuts. It's the greatest. You get it, but Alex Gray, who's this visionary artist, is kind of like that, where it's just like, there's so many layers. There's energetic layers. There's linguistic layers. I'm
actually a friend of Alex Gray's.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I got to show my artwork. There's a place here in Miami called Moksha Arts Collective, and run by a guy named Ray Araka. I don't know. I posted a picture of him on Friday on my light painting Facebook. Check it out if you get a chance. And he has kind of provided a space. It's one of the only places I know in the country that promotes metaphysical and psychedelic artwork. And for about 5 years in a row during Art Basel every year, Ray would do a really big moksha show, and Alex Gray came down every year, and I got to hang with him and his wife and shoot some stuff and interview them. And the last year he was here, a couple of my pieces were hanging in the show right next to his, dude. Ow! I was so honored, man, and humbled, and because that Sacred Mirrors book that he did, crazy.
Oh yeah, I've got his
crazy
Oracle deck of Cosm or whatever it is.
Yeah, wouldn't you love to go to their actual Cosm facility and walk through that live? Amazing.
Yeah, I was actually going to try to go when my sister was getting married, when Tool dropped their latest album. I'm not a major Tool fan, but then they did Fear Inoculum, I think it's called. They were going to do a listening party with Alex Gray because he does the artwork for Tool mostly, or exclusively. I'm not even sure how that works. But anyway, my sister's wedding rehearsal was that night, so I couldn't make it. But yes, a goal of mine is to, in an altered state or sober, I don't really care, but preferably in dosed or something, go to those art exhibits. He's definitely a magician. I'm pretty sure he's a Sagittarius with a Scorpio moon, or a Scorpio with a Sagittarius moon, or something like that. Once again, just tapping into deep
he's a
magic.
He's a purely receptive magician, though.
All right, maybe now would be a good time. I don't want to tell you where to go. Start some of the distinctions of what you're thinking in terms of practicing is.
Yeah, sure. So, man, there's like I said at the beginning, there's so many overlaps in what people do, but this is kind of how I've broken it down for me. It's kind of like 5 categories, and there's like natural magic, and that would be somebody that just uses nature and the things around them, like some of the southern root workers, and the people that really just do lots of nature spells and use that for love spells, all kinds of things like that. Then you have a whole section of practitioners that I label as tribal practitioners, and that would be, you know, like the shamans of the world, you know, in the different indigenous peoples areas, you know, like the Aborigines, you know, the Native Americans, and you know, for myself, my own magical background, I'm a mix of many generations of hardcore German, and my mom was Native American. So I've got this strange combo of Western magic and tribal magic that has been a really interesting concoction as it's mixed over the years. And I got deeply into Native American magic, but that's also where I would put the Afro-Cuban disciplines like Ifa and Santeria and Palo Mayombe, and those scenarios, and those deeply deal with natural elements, but also the spirits of nature in a really huge way. And those guys practice with more intent and kind of written rituals than natural magic people. And then the next category would be I give it this name because it gets called that a lot. I don't think it's better, worse, or like I don't assign any order to this or what's better or higher, in fact. But the area of high magic, which would encompass most of the Western traditions, the Lemmic, Crowley thing, the OTO.
It's more the Damien Eccles kind of flavor.
Yeah, exactly. But that I think that this would also encompass like the black hat magic in China and a lot of the feng shui masters and stuff. I think those would fall under this category as well, and they are super steeped in ritual. You know, like the Crowley stuff. You know, they're books and books and books written with specific hand postures, and it's really engineered. You know, it's not nearly as intuitive as some of the other things that I've worked with. I would also in that category, and I debated about this. I'd love your opinion about this. I for a long time considered myself a chaos magician, and not necessarily because I adhered to all of their principles, but one of the premises of chaos magic that I fell in love with is it doesn't really, you know, the kind of autonomy you have doesn't dictate, you know, being able to do a ritual. If you need to do some magic and you don't have the classical tools for that, then look around you, because everywhere around you is another tool that can be charged with intent and function on that. So it's chaos magic for me, and you know, my rebel spirit kind of detests all of the dogma kind of assigned to some of the bigger lodges and the mindset of a lot of Western magic, and the fact that chaos magic just kind of spit in the face of all of that. And
it's way more punk, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, you don't have a wand, but there's a crayon sitting there. You know, it'll work. The important thing is your own personal energy and your focused intent on where to direct that. And then from there, you can use any tool that's at your disposal. It's just like plants. One of the main things in Ifa and pretty much all of the Afro-Cuban disciplines is the use of plants and combining plants into a thing called an omiero, where you take water and rum, whatever else, combine it with plants that have been torn up and then ritualized with intent while tearing them up inside the water. And that then creates this bath that you strain out the herbs, and you can either use it in the bathtub, or what I don't have a bathtub, so I stand in the shower and pour it over the top of my head, especially when it's super cold, which, woo, and down your back. And there's one of those. There's thousands and thousands of mixtures to those, and the plant world and the deity that has dominion over all plants is called Osine, and he is the ruler of plant magic. So having specific formulas for those things, and those plants are all available here in Miami, and I go move up to Washington State, there's a whole different
economical situation going on.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it's good to be able to actually use those Bardon techniques and go inside the plant and see its energy and get back from it what its natural proclivities are. It's kind of cool.
Did you say the fifth one yet, or no?
No, I'm just at number 4 right now.
Word. Okay.
That was 3.
I have an observation, but I'll hold my tongue until you're done.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
Well, okay. So Raphael and I had a guest on. I forget his name exactly. Damon Dreamwhite, Diamond Walker, or something like that, and he was talking about this quartile, like an XY quartile axis thing, where it's almost like personality traits, or chaotic good, chaotic neutral, that kind of stuff. And basically he was getting into this, like, there's the all self, the God self, the no self, and the I self. And it seems that certain levels of these magic tap into certain levels of this. So, like, for example, when you're talking about like the super Wiccan kind of in the Tao nature kind of people, that seems to be part of the all self or something. They're tapping into like the natural kind of flow, and in a weird way, like Aboriginals, like you were saying, it's not better or worse. It's not about that. I agree with you. It's just the different approaches to the same well or something, like different angles of approach. And it seems like they would be coming from more of an what comes to mind is like almost like how the kid with the third eye raven from Game of Thrones has to like attach the tree or something. It's like getting into the Gaian mind in a different way, whereas maybe high magic or ritual magic, like you were saying, is maybe prefrontal cortex stuff, very linguistic based, very opposable thumbs magic, where it's like we've figured this out through logic and reason.
But I think
chaos would be postmodern kind of stuff more.
I think those things manifested. The world was not connected back then. In early stages, so populations would kind of be developing in a fairly restricted area. And I think depending on the kind of culture that was there and the mindset of the people that was there, you see spiritual connection manifest in ways that spoke to those individuals and those cultures at the time. It's only
completely, I hear you.
It's only been in the last 40, 50 years that the world has become, one world, and you have all this access to these different magical points of view that, you wouldn't have. And if you think about high magic and the way that it's so ritual, it so flows with the mindset of the people that were there. The Aborigines have this whole like concept of that. And, I think they're all amazing. Like my personal visualization when I think about magic, it's like looking up at the sky and you're seeing a planet-sized, perfectly faceted diamond that's just kind of spinning around very slowly. And you're looking at each of the facets. And every one of those facets is beautiful, man. It reflects it differently.
And necessary.
Yes, exactly. But the other really cool thing about that is no matter what facet you're looking to, ultimately at the bottom of that is exactly the same point. And
I hear you.
yeah.
So just, I mean, to clarify, because I fully agree. There's no better or worse. It seems, and I'm obviously bringing positions to this. Maybe, you know, like an Egyptian thinking, like Thoth had all this magic and language and gave it to humans or whatever. So I don't know how it all works, right? But it seems like when I was in Australia, for example, I was on LSD coming up at this kind of doof. They call it doof doof doof, this rave, outdoor rave. And nobody was really there. It was daytime. I was starting to come up pretty hard, and these guys were playing didgeridoos in front of me. Like I was like feet away, like 5 feet away, 10 feet away, and I was getting blasted sonically with these didgeridoos, and then coming up on LSD, which is also an interesting experience. And I was having these kind of toroidal visions, but also kind of thinking to myself, musing, like humans. I mean, this is a presupposition. Humans fell into consciousness in a certain way. At some point, we were more animal than man in a way. And then we kicked into more whatever man is, I guess, symbolic and all this kind of stuff a little differently. And like the Dreamtime kind of reality they're a part of in the Aboriginal heritage is one of the oldest models of magic and understanding and comprehension, or operation programming, whatever one wants to call it. And it's like, all right, if you have a bunch of people who are like, and this isn't like, you know, racist or anything like that, so I've got a caveat, but if you have a people group that are rising from like the animal mind in a very particular way and starting to tell themselves stories and interacting with the environment in a magical way, in a new way, of course you're going to have like the rainbow serpent being like the water, and it's like telling, you know, follow the rainbow serpent, and there's water, there's life. On acid it was very apparent. I was just like, holy shit, like they came into an it's not yet like fully formed prefrontal cortex shit. Like it's not like discrete language or whatever necessarily. It was like symbolic and archetypal in a kind of an in-between mode. How do you go from like fully unconscious, maybe animal life in a certain way, to a higher resonant frequency? There's a transition phase there. And I guess at some point we start telling our stories that get us, you know, to the water source regularly, as opposed to like, you know, dying en masse randomly because we can't find water as a troop of, you know, ape people or whatever the fuck we were. Obviously I'm bringing presuppositions to this. I don't know if Raphael even agrees with all this stuff. That's fine, because he's brought to a point the whole Darwinian, neo-Darwinian kind of model is definitely
It's definitely.
it's definitely given to us, and because of scientism and all this stuff, like we kind of say yes, that seems to be the case, but we don't know what dinosaurs sounded like, or, you know, their flesh and stuff. We just have bones. Like,
Well, technically, you know, and even I have funny sounds in the background, as you may hear. Construction, transformation is happening. So, I mean, obviously, at least there would be two views, let's say, or two tracks. The one would be the idea of the evolution of consciousness in itself, which may also go through densities and layers and so on. And I guess it's not mentioned there because I recently finally started listening to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is quite easy to listen to online. But anyhow, of course, even Ra, I believe, shares this, and Bashar also, this idea of like animals, especially pets, and, you know, they really like you and they're just like humans. And then the idea of them reincarnating, or I believe this was even featured in a Midnight Gospel episode, which I also started watching just now.
nice.
So there are these aspects, but then of course it's a completely different idea to then say, okay, I look at Darwinian evolution and their presuppositions and the idea of generally a very slow and gradual evolution, and then I just look at, you know, what fossils do you find and all of that, and then you just get into some kind of issues, or some specific mammals, I guess, like woodpeckers, and I mean humans, of course, yeah, they're just so incredibly complex.
Or platypus, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's just like a random chaotic type organization with just a chance of making something that's actually workable, like would basically be impossible, you know, to continue evolving and surviving. Because if I would imagine that I'm just changing slowly, you know, add something here, add something there, then you would have so many in-between forms that most likely would be completely unsuitable to actually live on Earth. So yeah,
I'll just say
that
this
view.
really quick and then I'll shut the fuck up. So basically what I'm saying is it seems certain cultures or certain humans have an experience of magic and reality that's primitive sounds like dismissive or something, but it's more archaic or it's more naturally imbued, like you were saying, like more nature oriented and embedded in nature. And then it seems if you get further along, like all culture really is, I've heard, is some like ornate mating ritual. Like we're just learning more complex words and clothing and all this stuff to try to like score more like chicks, man, or whatever the fucking idea is. But like once you get to a certain point in human consciousness, that's where it seems more based on the culture of the petri dishes at hand at certain places in time. That's when you start getting things like the I Ching, or which is obviously more complicated than just kind of being like the rivers, the rainbow serpent. It's getting into like dynamos of understanding linguistically and kind of getting into binary coding, stuff like that. High magic, ritual magic, like you were saying, being very like specific to like this hand gesture with this word at this time. Like, not to say that clearly native cultures and more primitive, and not in a bad way, derogatory way, but more ancient cultures, naturally inclined cultures have ritual, have ceremony, have all this stuff, and very ornate ones at that, but they tend not to be very verbose unnecessarily, or very like like kind of what you're saying with like Crowley, and like just like, hey, stand this way on the full moon and say this, knock 3 times and flip your skirt up, or all this craziness. And it's like that's a very modern situation, it would seem. And then to get to the last thing you were talking about, and I know you've got a 5th one, I want to hear what it is. Chaos magic, like the Grant Morrison style of things, where it's like you can use primal screams, or you can use sigil magic as a comic book as a sigil magic, or all this kind of stuff.
Sigil magic is amazing, and the cornerstone of my own practice now, and I got that specifically from there.
Yeah, so I think that because I'm a double Gemini, so I think it's a trickster energy. You're an Aquarius. I think you get the kind of higher octave of this in more of an engineering way. I'm probably more of a kid about it, and you're probably more like articulate about it. But chaos magic it makes sense in a postmodern world where anything, everything is relative. Let's put it that way. So it's not like, okay, the shaman with the certain cup at this time with the head feathers has to be the one to do it. It's like we can kind of hack. It's like street level magic.
Well,
it's punk magic.
The other thing about it is that I never wanted to be locked into one discipline. Like I wanted pieces of Crowley, I wanted pieces of Ifa, I wanted pieces.
That's the best
of
way to
all
fly, though. Syncretism.
Yeah,
it's like take the high watermarks of it all.
To reinforce that point, that's really the reason. I think I showed it to Eileen Wolf, whom we recently had on Team Rabbit Hole. She also really digs your deck. And of course, for me, I'll retell the story because it's a good one. When I was, like deciding basically I want to really get into tarot, of course, I was aware of the Crowley deck I bought when I was 17, and then the Rider-Waite deck I picked up along the way somewhere or whatever. And then I was like, okay, it's about time to get like a kind of deck. And actually,
what's the next iteration kind of thing?
Yeah. And I'm not even sure, Brian, if you noticed, but there is this website called, I believe, Eclectic Tarot, which is kind of like a collection of quite...
I sent my deck to Solara, who was the moderator of that. I'm so sad that's gone away, but she released it in the new deck thing and sent me back this letter saying that she had never seen a deck like that, which just made my heart so happy because I'd gone to that site for many years, way before I even thought about making my own deck. It's a brilliant site still, actually, although they haven't been active for many years.
Right. So I was just browsing through the decks, and everyone has a different art style and so on, or different preference, and everyone has a different penchant. Like, I guess, someone likes elves, or like I like aliens or whatever, and there are all kinds of decks. But at least to me, I mean, like Rider-Waite, like, is really clean, has this medieval look. The even older ones can kind of get difficult to interpret or even kind of see with modern eyes.
Or relate to
me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's many very modern ones that, at least for me, just kind of don't hold up to my aesthetic standard or something, or they have a particular art style which I just don't fully appreciate. They're either kind of too boring, or they're like too glossy, or they have strange art. And there's plenty of beautiful decks.
Strange categories like the bird tarot or the gay tarot or the this tarot or that, it's some subject, some focused subject that it's about.
Right. Which I guess is, equally fine. But I was more like, obviously at that point, since I'm all about, I guess, the unity or something, or the allness of everything, looking for something that, first of all, pleases my eye, which of course the images, the way you created them with the smoke and so on, and the entities coming through the smoke basically fits that perfectly. And, it's kind of flashy, but it's not like too glossy, tacky kind of thing. And it's super, let's say, synchronistic and emergent, Rorschach type style done. And the actual point is that it combines all these other systems simply, by including them at the border. So you included the IFA system, you included runes, you included musical notes.
It's informationally
OTO
dense
attribution.
Yeah.
And so basically through that one deck, and even though the image may be kind of nondescript if you don't know what the card itself kind of means, so then you can just like intuitively interpret it because it's not obviously a man or something, but it's like something, right? But you can relate it to all the other systems and can get like a really good grip of what you're actually holding in your hand, because you have suggestions at least for all of these connections. And that just then kind of shows again how all these systems actually belong together. Yeah, which I think is amazing. And at least to me, this whole syncretic approach is really appealing.
I'm going to be getting your decks, Bryan. I'm not joking. I'm probably going to hit you up after this episode and be like, how do I get them shipped at the same time so I don't double down on shipping?
All right, cool, man. I'd love for you to have it and be able to talk to you about them and share that. I think you'd find it a really rich journey. I'm still, it's 8 years now. I'm still finding stuff in them. And depending on what my emotional content is when I go to do the readings, it's like, woo. And I keep my deck out all the time, right at my right hand. And I probably do, I don't know, lots of readings every day. And the angel deck, this was kind of crazy. The angel deck and the tarot deck, you would think that they're sort of divergent. But I kind of designed them with the angel deck to be a system that would work with the tarot deck, and
almost like a Vesica Pisces.
Now they've become like I do every reading with both, and the tarot deck gives me this volume of information and facts and defines flows, and the angel deck defines my emotional state at the moment and where I need to go in like really specific terms, and it's kind of interesting because I did, the angel deck was, I certainly channeled the archetypes and, when in shooting it and doing those, but they were kind of concepts that I had already learned. And the angel deck was a really new exploration for me and something that I had done a couple times, but not nowhere near to this level, was doing the automatic writing for each of those. So like I did a big 360 page beast of a manual for that thing with like buku information. And while I've got most of the readings pretty much memorized, I still like reading them word for word, because every single time I pull an angel card and go, oh my God, it's like it's talking to me in exact words about exactly what's happening right now. I've been flipping my teacher out with that since I made him too, which is not easy to do. And so they have correlations. So like there's a tarot card that correlates to every angel card too. So it just becomes this really nice multi-dimensional scope. So yeah, I'd love for you to have them.
When do you think the third one's going to drop?
I'm just waiting. I've been trying to get somebody to invest with me, and just was on the edge of that before this whole pandemic thing hit. But that's kind of been on a hold right at the moment, because I order I'm not super rich, so I order kind of small runs of the decks, and they're
We gotta fix this.
kind of pricey because they cost
Oh,
me a
they're high
lot.
quality.
They cost me a lot to get them done in that way. But I've researched the whole, like, if I could get just not even that much money, like $5,000, I could get both of those decks printed in scenarios that would make the cost come down. I could get a quantity that I could then start doing the wholesale thing, because
Well, it's kind of like bands who have records and T-shirts. It's like as soon as you get past the threshold, you're not doing it from the back of your truck kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Have you ever thought about a GoFundMe or whatever? I mean, I'm pretty sure that you could raise that.
I've just never felt really happy about that. As a matter of fact, I started setting one up, and I don't know, there was just something inside me that went, I don't think this is the right way to go with this. I have a really funky connection about money and magic. And, we've talked about that before, but it's a hard issue for me.
It can muddy the water for sure.
Magic is the thing in my life that's sacred. It's the way I commune with God, or my concept of God. And, when you're asking for money, no matter how much trust there is, when money enters that scenario,
when the economic paradigm comes in, it changes the gears.
Yeah, and it's not it takes away a purity that it does, in other modes. So, I've been trying to work through that for the last few years, and
well, maybe you don't have to. I was telling Raphael, I've got a friend I was in Australia with who's sending me this guitar. She's a mixed media artist, and one of the things that birthed out of my going down there, I kind of encouraged her, just let's do a Team Rabbit Hole Oracle deck, right? Like, let's make a deck. I mean, I want to do it with a bunch of people, maybe even you at some point doing a collaboration or something. But anyway, the point is, she listened to an episode you guys did on here, The Wizard of Odd, that I forget what number, but one that you were talking about the formation of your tarot deck, and you had said it was kind of this magical working. You did it over these, very processionally oriented words like, equinox, or I don't know how you did it, but she kind of mimicked it. She started it at the spring equinox, and she's sending me kind of images that are crazy. I'll send them to you in Messenger and Facebook. It's nuts. But her
awesome.
aunt is a publisher in Australia, and they have a connection to some Chinese casino deck printers or something. I don't even know. I don't know all the details, but point is, if that starts going down in a way that makes sense, I'll totally, maybe you don't have to raise any money. Maybe you just get on board that situation.
That would be really, really amazing. I think it's time for that to happen. It's like I have a not a huge group of people that have gotten it over the years, but it's kind of become kind of an extended family for me. I've stayed in contact with lots of people that have bought it, and they've come back with questions and suggestions. My connection with Raphael came out of that, so that on that level. And I don't mind for a second selling the product, like I see the tarot deck as a physical product of my magical of a magical act. The magical act itself was really pure, and so whatever comes out of that, if I can reap reward from that feels really, really great.
I think, yeah, it's good. I feel you on the front with, like, especially with music. I feel it. I don't make tarot decks right now, but like, it's like, I want to do this for the purity of the creation and the expression and the involvement with the Tao and channeling, or however I want to split this. And then when people start being like, slap a price tag on that, what's this worth? Like, it's really hard to understand. Like, value is transcendent to economy. You know what I mean? We've created systems to, like, try to navigate value through paper, cotton, money, and gold and all this shit. But it's like value. Like, there's things, like you're saying, like some of these experiences you've had probably with the community, the culture that you've created with your magic and the art that you've imbued through your decks, doesn't have a price tag. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like one could say, $100 an hour, come talk with me, or something like that. I mean, that's when I start getting cringy, where I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, I hate that. Like the tarot deck. The tarot deck started for me as a challenge for my teacher. I always, I mean, when you look at the volume of information that needs to go into a tarot deck, it can be well, for me, it was a little intimidating. I mean, just the fact of creating 78 unique pieces of art, that's not like, let me do that tomorrow kind of thing. That's a commitment of time, lots of time, and really intense. Like I started on the solstice, ended up on the spring equinox, but in that time there wasn't a night that I wasn't like really just busting on it, and
that's just the art, let alone imbuing it with the correspondences, like all the stuff on the sides of the cards, you know what I mean? Like just creating artifacts of artifacts.
Yeah, yes.
That takes a lot of energy, let alone making it correspond to the higher degrees of magical schools before you or whatever.
So I never set out for a second to go, oh, let me make something I can sell. I set out to go, okay, you've learned all this stuff. Let's take it all. Let's make a Cadillac deck for you to read, for me to read with, and that was the sole intent of it at first. And then when it came out as nice as it did, I was super pleased with the way it manifested, and it was like, okay, well, and I showed it to a number of people, and they're like, wow, you should sell this, and so I kind of went in through the back door.
Well, you learned the scales, and then now you're writing songs that are awesome. It's like, oh, I'm jamming, and people are like, that's pretty dope. Why isn't that a record?
Right, exactly. So you asked about a third deck. I actually have 3 more decks ready to come out. The next deck I have I just need to get published. Actually, it's finished. I'm about 3/4 of the way through the manual for that, and it's really satisfying for me. It's like the third one in the troika of decks. So it'll be the tarot deck, the angel deck, and the wizard's deck. And the wizard's deck is, the tarot deck, I used a really known and ingrained system and played off of it and did my own take on that, added new stuff. So it became mine, but I referred to a long-standing tradition of meanings and numbers of cards, the whole 9 yards. The angel deck, I found this collection of 72 angels, the Shemham of Forish, which are the 72 angels of the names of God, and really dug that. I'd been into that for many, many, many years, but it had no divination system with it. So that goodness was then coming up with my own divinatory interpretation of how those would work. So that was really awesome. But the third deck is completely my own cosmology.
Nice.
And it is a magical person's initiation. So it's 81 cards. The first 27 cards relate to the skills that you need to acquire to start practicing. And funny, we're talking about this today. Then there are 2 more sections of 27 different kinds of practitioners, the white practitioners and the black practitioners. And it relates to music and color and sound. And wow, I had such a good time doing that. And as an artist, it was super fulfilling because it really was my own creation, and I'm stoked about that. And then I've got a mudra deck that is really awesome too. That I did a tie-in with the I Ching and hand mudras, and that's going to be a really
sounds dope.
Good one as well. And then I've got kind of a funky one that's just more mainstream. That's a daily oracle deck that's just the letter B, and each one of the cards is a hand letter drawn B, but that like be happy, be sad, be glad, be up, be down, and it has a specific meaning for that day and the kind of energy to bring to that day. So
how many cards are in that one?
There are 81 cards in that one also.
And is there a reason you're doing 81 and 27? I mean,
81 is a 9x9 square, and that's what 27 is a really sacred number to me, and it so those the breakup of those sections into that, 3 times 27 is 81.
Does that relate to sun square tiling or no?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. I don't want to get you too off track. What was the fifth?
Well, I was thinking
thing?
maybe at this moment in time might be a great time for a Raphael track, and then I've got black and white magic and projective and receptive magic, and maybe we could jump on those when we come back. You good with that, Raphael?
Perfecto.
Welcome back to episode 15 of The Wizard of Odd with Bryan Lahr on magic practitioners.
Hey, good to be back. As always, love your tracks, man. I've by the way, I've got all 10 of the videos done, and I'm really happy with it. I went back to square one, just started over, edited them all, and I think they're really good. And I spelled your name correctly. Oh, dude,
which is not that easy to do.
I'm so sorry about that, man.
It's
and a big
fine.
deal.
No, it's completely fine, and I mean it, especially in your case, Bryan. I mean, in all cases, I'm, not attached enough to that name. I just found it interesting because I know that you lost it, but I thought, like, if anyone, you would be the one to know. You were the first one who ever did my own numerology for my name, or actually, what may be interesting to anyone listening, in the divine triangle. Bryan, maybe just mute yourself because your voice activation is on. Thank you. So in the Divine Triangle, Faith Gervain does debunker, the one we keep referencing, there's actually like 1 or 2, just very few special case rules for your name. And one of them, if I remember correctly, is that if some part of your name, like a Y, like in my case, is actually spelled like an I, or is pronunciated like an I, then it actually switches. And I believe there was one of those in my name, so that was actually great because through your exercising my name in that way, I actually immediately got to even see the caveat of the system, let's say.
Yes. Well, I share that with you, and the name thing is kind of important to me because my name, first of all, my whole name is Charles Bryan Lahr. So I go by Bryan. Charles is a family name, like many generations of, but my mom wasn't having that. I'm not calling him Charles. So my dad acquiesced and they agreed on Bryan, but my mom, being the twisted artistic individual that she was, spelled it with a Y instead of an I. So the entirety of my life I've been, okay, what's your name? That's Bryan Lahr. That's Bryan with a Y. So, it's like if somebody does lots of, if you develop a relationship with somebody and they don't know how to spell your name, that's kind of bogus.
It's alienating.
I had a really dyslexic, fucked up time in seeing that CZY. It just didn't. I don't know why I couldn't make it, but I've done it.
It's kind of hard to compute.
I've done it so many times now. I think I'm there. Watch, I'll send it to you. No, you misspelled it again. I can't tell you how many times I've checked it.
It reminds me a little of The Mask with Jim Carrey, where he's like, "Why? Because I gotta." I don't know if that's from The Mask, but I think so. And it's funny because my name is just Jim, like, right, James originally, but it's like I joke around sometimes because it's so simple. It's like a mechanic name, like Jim or Al or something like that. And I'm like, sometimes people are like, how do you spell your name? I'm like, DGIHME or something like that. Just fuck with them.
Right? Oh, man.
Just a quick point before you go off onto this, onto the other 3 kind of schools. Because Raphael was kind of being like, a name, what's in a name, a rose is a rose kind of thing, but like I do think there's a lot, it's almost the linguistic sigil that we get as a resonator. What are your thoughts on names?
I think that absolutely they are an imprint of a frequency that you then function on your entire lifetime. And that to me was one of the things that really blew me up about numerology. was that it wasn't a spiritual concept or a nebulous kind of thing. It was like these numbers add up to this. And, over, God, dude, I got that book when I was in my early 20s. So, I mean, I've been using that to, when I go to a meet, I mean, I use it thousands of times a day, man. It's like I think like that now because numbers, as definitions of frequencies, are always true. That frequency is always that frequency. Depending on what comes next to it, it changes. But those, I think, are definitely energetic imprints on your life course. I know some people. I know a number of people actually that have changed letters in their words, their names, or changed their name altogether in order to get a better frequency happening. And I was kind of skeptical about that at the time, but it actually seems to matter. And whether that's really energetically happening, I leave that up to interpretation. But my own perception is, and there. The other possibility is that because they decided that was what was going to happen, that manifested that as well. But I put great stock in the frequency definition that numbers give you, and when you start connecting them and seeing the way they overlay in different situations, it's one of my favorite forms of metaphysics.
So like Prince, the symbol, like that's totally a different level of it, I guess.
That's more of a sigil than,
Right.
than numerology. Yeah.
So the isness of four is like four, and it doesn't really matter what like culture says. There's going to be a nature to it. I mean, we can kind of dress it up how we want with tablecloth, but the table remains.
That's because and that's why I'm in the school of learning I'm in now, because it gets down through all the cultural things, strips away all of the dogma, the individual, regions of the world in which you practice, and gets down to the pure energy, which is what we're all constructed of anyway. And when you can get down to that pure form, I think you're able to increase your abilities and your effectiveness on pretty much every level. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just for the record, I completely agree. And basically, I also downloaded that framework into my mind. And I'm right now maybe not using it as actively, but I have it on cue anytime. And there was a time when anything I was looking at, like any number, automatically got converted to a tarot card in my perception. So that's like a really amazing filter. And so I agree about the relevance and value of the name and numbers also, because to me it's kind of like, at least in my view, I'm sure my parents or whoever didn't choose my name. I chose my name, especially by now. I'm pretty sure about that. The numerology nearly confirms it. So, but through this method, just like through astrology, actually, which is also kind of something where we only get to know the information after we're already born. So there's like a time when we're not really conscious of it, but then get to rediscover it. I really see all of those like as hints that our own higher self is leaving us in terms of blueprints and ideas and concepts. So just that it becomes easier to remember afterwards. And yeah, so Jim, I can just highly recommend also to you that particular book to everyone, actually. Numerology and the Divine Triangle by Faith Gervain and Dusty Bunker. It really is the combination of, astrology, tarot, and numerology.
That's what I was just going to say, that I think that was kind of the birthplace of where I came to combining all those systems into my tarot deck, because her book was not just the numbers, but it was like the tarot correspondence and the astrological correspondence. So I really from the get-go started learning with that kind of mindset in mind, that there were connections to other processes outside of just the physical numbers thing, which I think is pretty cool. And that book really stands the test of time. It's been,
I'm gonna buy it now that you guys. I just looked at it. It's like,
sure.
oh, that's a ground score for sure.
Yeah, it's a cheapie too. It's not expensive.
It's not written on like in blood under a full moon like these Crowley books or whatever. It's like there's only so many copies or whatever. I'm not that into Crowley, but I know some of his texts can run very expensively. And in fact, I think that's I know it wasn't a replacement for Thoth, but I think your first deck was kind of an answer to that. Is that right?
I read until I made my deck. The top deck was my go-to deck, and I read with that probably for 20 years. And
so it definitely imprinted itself on you a little.
Yeah, so most of my like I changed, like I followed the Toth format with. Like I changed, I have a lust card, the 8th card is adjustment, and
Magus stuff.
Yeah, well, no, I changed some of the names of several of the cards that followed the Crowley thing instead of temperance. I did my own version, or the Toth version of that.
Well, it sounds like each deck you do is making you more of your own individual practitioner, right? It seems like, the first deck is like, coming from the schools, I'm like, I don't know, not an apprentice, but like you weren't like a master. There's no real good analogy. It's like, okay, I've learned all this stuff, now I'm regurgitating kind of like a great cover band or something. It's like, here's what I know with my spin on it. And then it turned into like, all right, I've got an album and maybe there's a cover or two on it. And now these last decks are like, these are completely sonic territories that no one's doing but me.
Exactly. And yes, you would be absolutely accurate with that.
So without further ado, take us into those further domains of practitioners.
Okay, so the next category is kind of fraught with controversy, and that is the definition of white and black magic. I'll refer back in my to my opening thing, in that I think magic itself is neutral, but the practitioners that use it, there are definitely the white side and there are definitely the black side. On the white side, I would be, I would be considering. Crystal workers of all kinds, I don't know if you've done much work with crystals, but they're a real benchmark, or a real go-to tool for me. And I notice with those that if you are working with those things with ill intent, very, very negative things happen. They'll happen to the whatever you're trying to affect, but that bounces back on you super hard, man. And it's like they don't like that. They're about evolution, not destruction. So I know lots of people that do healings with those, that scry with those, use them to charge environments, and those have an intrinsic energy called a piezoelectric energy already. And then when they make amazing vessels for being able to project it and intent out into the world. And depending, I've gone really deeply into them, and it's my opinion after long experimentation that the shape of the faces of crystals, the top shape of the faces, those configurations, depending on how they're configured, lend themselves to particular things. Point in case, there's a kind of crystal that when you're looking at it, there are two opposing faces that meet at the top that have 7 sides. In between those, at the bottom, is a triangle, and on the back of the crystal, exactly opposite to that, is a side that has 5 faces. and that is called a channeling crystal. And really, man, it does it like is an instant connection. Raphael, you should do a little experimentation if you haven't already, using one of those in some of your channeling sessions. I find them to be really. When I did the automatic writing, I had one of those in my left hand and held it the whole time, and it just kept that connection like super strong and super crisp. There's a kind, one of my favorite kinds is when you turn the crystal in just the right way. And again, everything I'm talking about right now are the top faces where the apex comes, where the termination happens. When you take those faces and you kind of turn them into the light so that the whole surface of the face is reflecting kind of white light, and you can see the structures and the little imperfections and things on the surface. There are a group of crystals that have little triangle formations that are either raised or kind of indented into the face of the crystal. And those are called record keeper crystals. And
I've heard of this.
Yeah. And
like Lemurian kind of stuff, or Atlantis.
Yeah, and they really do have information stored in those, and it's accessible. And depending on, like I had a friend that had a huge, like, it was probably 6-8 inches in diameter, and the faces on the top were big. And one of them had like 50 of those little record keepers all over the top of it. And I kept thinking, wow, this looks like one of those old computer cards, when they were punching out holes, and making patterns that's what the computer would read. It has that kind of sequence feeling to it. Like if you approach this and are pushed on those in the right way, you're really going to get some information. And when a lot of the crystals just have 1 or 2 on the faces, but I've got a couple that have like 20 or 30 of those triangles on them.
A regular Library of Alexandria there.
And when pushing on individual, like focusing on an individual triangle, you get a certain kind of information. When you push on groups, you get another whole bunch of. So it really is a library of stuff that you can farm for a long, long time. I keep clusters in my workspace, and leave an intent for my well-being, and the well-being of my space. And those emanate energy out in all directions. And I when I go away for a few days and come back and walk in the door, it's just like, awesome. So I won't spend the whole time talking about crystals, although I could, but I consider those to be one of the greatest examples of something that would be considered white magic. And this opinion would probably be a little controversial too, but I make a distinction between witchcraft and Wicca. There are lots of similarities to those, but the hardcore Wiccans that I know seem to be in the, harm to none kind of scenario, and try to maintain a purity about that. And people that practice witchcraft they're either in a neutral zone where they'll use black or white magic, depending on what they need, or decidedly dark. And
right, I hear you.
Yeah, so
one's almost more Gaian and just like chill Taoist Gaian stuff. It's like, I'm just part of the Tao. I'm a magic, like do no harm. Like nature does no harm inherently. And then sometimes the other are neutral or black. It's like, I do what I want. And what do I want? This. And it's like a willful thing.
Well, and it's also about what kinds of things you're attracting, and whether you're functioning from a spiritual space or an ego space. My next example of this is one I lived very, very deeply, and that's the difference. I'm going to use the system of Ifa, the Afro-Cuban system of Ifa, and the Afro-Cuban system of Palo Mayombe, which many people consider to be the darkest magic on the planet. And Ifa uses nature and more earth-oriented scenarios, but they are also deeply connected to what are called the orishas, which are their gods. And in the system of Ifa that I learned, there were over 400 of those, and the divination system for that is called an opeli string, and that is made with these seeds, big seeds called opeli seeds, and you break them. They kind of like, when they get ripe and open, you kind of break them off at the top, and you connect two sides with 4 seeds on each side, and then throw the chain. And depending on the sequence of whether it came up or down, forms different symbols called odus. And those odus are the divinatory meanings of that symbol. So there are 256 different odus. And talk about intimidating when I first started, because within the structure of those 256, like the very first odu, Yobi Meiji, there are hundreds of stories. They're called patakis that are associated with that, and each one of those patakis has a written allegorical story where answers are hidden in it that have the incantation to open up, the plants to use for whatever thing, and whatever sacrifice or offering needs to be made to which god to help you accomplish that. Most of the Ifa people that I know use that for healing, to help people get jobs, lots and lots and lots of love spells, to get money. They stay focused in a generally helpful world, and the orishas are decidedly more white light than dark, although they're all both. Just like the angels in the Shemha Meforish, people have this concept that the angels are all just goodness and light and fluffy, but
There's
that
an angel
really,
of death, all that kind of stuff.
that really isn't the case, man. And the angel that killed all the Egyptian sons, you would have to look at
Exactly.
that actor and go, well, okay.
Well, that's like more of a Kali energy, right? So it takes all kinds. And I think it's funny that it's 256. Isn't that like the number of colors in like original? I don't even know why 256 sounds familiar, but I feel like that's some kind of digital culture thing.
Power of 2.
Say again?
It's a power of 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in contrast to that, is a system called Palo Mayombe, and it is dark to say the least, but even it can be used for healings and for things like that. But usually the people that I experienced go into that for power and control and to manifest their will, not in the world, but on other people, and to harm other people. You can kill with that system very, very intently. And, most of the Afro-Cuban things, rely on animal sacrifice. And those entities all feed on blood, on life force and blood energy. And in Palo Mayombe, it's kind of an intense thing, because you start off building this cauldron, and within that cauldron are thousands of ingredients. the purpose being to recreate in a microcosm, the macro world of nature. So there's all kinds of dirts from all over the world. There are sticks from all over the world. There are different, like...
So it's like a terrarium, almost.
A terrarium on uber steroids.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just one little piece. It's like everything representative of the physical world. And then into that cauldron to charge it, you know, you don't actually, not everybody leaves their body when they die. Some people stick around trapped in their body for a while. And those guys go to acquire one of those and put it in the cauldron to make it work for them, which is also controlled by a palo orisha, let's say, and like siete rohe and Sarabanda. You know, Sarabanda's the most common one. Mama Chola, you probably heard that. Carlos Castaneda did a song about Mama Chola a while back. So within each of those have really a distinct personality. And
do you mean like, Carlos Santana?
Yes.
Okay, you said Castaneda. I was like, I didn't know he was a musician.
No, I'm sorry. That was a brain freeze. Cool. Yeah. So the thing about Palo Mayombe is that most people are usually looking for incredible power, and it'll give you that power, but you have to feed it a lot. And as you use it over the years, it wants, you know, you start off with chickens, you know, smaller stuff, but then it wants bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger things, bulls, cows, horses, and until it finally wants you. And the really deepest, darkest secret of that is that at that point, unless you're willing to give up your own life, which hardly anyone is, you have to go find it a sacrificial substitute and offer that person up to it. And, you know, to me, that's the blackest, darkest action that anyone could take. And of course, you know, that's with my own set of moralities and you know, guidelines. But
I feel you. I'm on that wave. It's pretty dark.
Yeah, I can't think of anything more than that. And
so that's what
you
makes
know,
me think of. Go ahead.
I mentioned earlier that I ran afoul of a really bad group of people, and it was a coven of Palo Mayombe practitioners.
Why am I not surprised?
And I went, they went on attack, and there was a group of 13 of them, and every Saturday the group would get together to whack me and try to make me crazy. They weren't trying to kill me yet, but that they moved to that. They were trying to make me just insane. And, you know, I took off and went to the other side of the country. I went to Oregon, up to Eugene, and found this sanctuary up there that I could like heal and get better. I had gotten involved in doing a documentary about Palo Mayombe at the time, and that's how that connection happened. And as it turned out, I was being groomed to be the leader's sacrificial substitute. We're exactly the same age. We're born 2 days apart. There were just this long list of synchronicities that if you were looking at it from that point, I was perfect. But I'm
glad you got away from that.
That was not something I was willing to do. So going back to plants, there's a plant called Pomarosa that is like death to those spirits. As a matter of fact, if you take powdered Pomarosa leaves and combine that with the urine of a black mare and sprinkle that around the house of a Mayombero, all the spirits from his Ngangas will leave and never mount again. So you've effectively
kryptonite.
Yeah, exactly. So I remembered that while I was out in Oregon, and I had the woman I had been seeing for a while track that plant down, because it grows not abundantly here, but it does grow here. And she tracked down some leaves, and I started doing my own magic towards it, and that was the turnaround for me. And that's when I started coming back. You know, the old saying, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And I can't think of a better example than that. But you know, practicing white and black magic, you know, it's like, you know, when I define the word wizard, I would say that definition for me would be someone who has acuity with all disciplines and in every direction, and has a toolbox filled with whatever implements he needs for the work at hand. And yeah, so anyway, that really was a at first devastating set of circumstances, but at the same time it really taught me a lot. Any questions on that? I'm going to move on to the
Well, it just reminds me of like 9/11. I've thought of as an occult ritual. It's like I don't like when we go to war and stuff. I think those are like sacrifices for like spirits that want quite a bit, maybe necessarily like what you're saying.
I think you're absolutely correct. Yes.
Which is horrifying.
Well, not really. I mean, when you think about, like, we are not the dominant life form, nor are we even close to the top of the food chain. And, you know, when you look around at the way things are being manipulated now to create fear and panic and anger and division, you know, all of those are super strong emotions that other level entities consume, you know, and other level entities above them farm them for different, you know, there are ends to that as things evolve. But, you know, we're, as a species, we're rather arrogant, you know, and think we're the ones that are in, you know, so in a way, it's kind of like they farm us. And when you decide to stay in the world and stay in all the aspects of the world, you know, money and power and all of those things, you know, you don't get to rise up out of the mire of the perfection of the way this world is built for that, you know, and see that there are other alternatives. And, you know, just the fact that you're aware that they're there and doing it, you know, that breaks that mind connection that they have in the background telling you to do things and feel ways. And, you know, it's
Cue the
kind
scene
of,
from They Live. It's like once you see it, you see it.
That's no true that, brother. All right.
Was there one more?
There is one more, last but not least, and this is the one I find myself residing in, for the last 12 years and for the foreseeable rest of my life, and that is the act of projective and receptive magic. And projective magic really deals with using the universal energy and life force and being able to sculpt that to your intent, and to be able to actually cycle that down to this earthly vibration in order for it to have a density enough to be able to do physical effects here. By the way, Raphael, I'm going to send you these later, but I found a bunch of my videos that I did right as I first got pretty decent at spinning the rod, and I filmed some of my experiments with that. I had a good time looking at those. It's been so long. I'll send a few of those on to you. I think you might get a kick out of scoping them. So the idea of doing projective magic, to like we had torrential rains this weekend, and my house is in a scenario that if I left it alone, I flood really easily, and there's nothing worse than having your house flooded with water. So I've gotten really good at being able to affect the weather like right around my personal space. So I was able to kind of like shut off the deluge and kind of push that away. The last really big hurricane that came through, I shielded up in a really solid shield over the top of my fence and walled in my garden. And at one point, the water was raging so hard that it was almost like horizontal rain. And you could actually see it kind of hitting that space and making kind of a dip up and then along the top of it and going off back down, and kind of really kept me good in a really desperate situation. And those skills are not really that easy to get to unless, there are some people that I've met that they were born that way, man, and that was their natural path, and
they got the shine.
Yeah, they really did. The unfortunate part about that is that sometimes when you're imbued with that already, it's like this amazing vat of potential that's waiting for you to add ingredients and stir and make into an amazing soup. But sometimes I notice when people have that already that they're good with that wherever it is, and they don't really push that. And I've often thought, wow, man, if I had been born with that potential and been able to start there, wow, how far could I get? So it's kind of a dual-edged sword, with natural abilities as opposed to abilities that you deeply desire and have passion for, that you go after. It's just like music. We go back to that analogy again. I grew up with Brendan O'Brien, who is the producer that did all the YouTube albums and Stone Temple Pilots and just a ton of like 90s and still working now. And dude, that kid was 13 years old and playing stuff that I was just like, oh my God. And his grasp of music theory, and it's no wonder, he's an exception to what I was just talking about in that from the time I met him until now, I mean, he's always learning new stuff and expanding his skills and refining his ear, and it's really cool to see, and it's nice when people take that original bag of goodness and make something miraculous out of it. Really fun. Okay, and then the last chunk would really refer to receptive skills, and those are more the intuitive things, psychic abilities, being able to. And within that context, there's, being able to read words, to see words, and there's being able to like actually see places, to astral travel, to effectively read minds. All of those things are skills that are you receiving energy from the outside to give you information, as opposed to taking your information and projecting that out into the world. And, in the...
So one is more abracadabra, and the other would be like, I interpret the abracadabra of life around me.
Explain that further.
Well, I'm not totally versed well enough to expound upon this well, but I think abracadabra is like, I speak, therefore it comes into existence, kind of like I'm making it so from a will perspective, whereas the receptive is obviously like, I'm taking the will of the universe and being a filter for it, and then grokking
I'd almost say the question is, how are you listening with Bryan?
Right.
Yes. Well, I would say that both of those things are, if you're receptive and you just wait for things to come to you, then that's not an exercise of will. But if you're trying to glean some information and you invite, doing a tarot reading, that's a receptive
Gotcha.
act of will, in my opinion. Yeah. So anything that you're starting off with a purpose about, whether that's to receive or to push, I think both of those are acts of will. But some people,
And they also get into like electromagnetic mechanism. Are you magnetizing? Are you like retracting or like projecting or whatever?
well, yeah, I think that's another way of saying it. Yes, but truly, a magnet has two poles.
Correct.
So the learning that I've been in now equally emphasizes both those directions. And my teachers, he's been using this for many decades and has said it to me more times than I can tell you. It's like having a really good car and you're sitting in the garage and you're ready to take off, but you have no gas in the car. So it doesn't matter how good you can see out the windshield. You can only see as far as you can see out the windshield. You're not going to go anywhere. And vice versa. If you have a gas tank full of gas and you hit the accelerator, but your windshield's dirty, probably not going to be a really good outcome. Yeah. So in my learning and my own personal practice, I emphasize both of those equally. And then you wind up using, like, when I astral travel now, it's like, yeah, I'm taking those projective skills with me that, get you some level of respect in some worlds where it might be a little dicey, and being able to protect yourself and being able to, contribute energy. Like, I exchange, like, an entity spends, a couple hours talking to me and sharing their world and their perspective and images that are just amazing. I like to give them a little piece of energy, as
It's like a tithe.
as a thank you. No, it's more a thank you than they never ask for that there, but I like to be a courteous explorer. Yeah.
Well, in that sense, it's like the law of exchange. You've got something, so you feel obligated, or not obligated, but I hear what you're saying. Like,
Well,
why
that's a
not give you
German
something
thing,
back?
man. When somebody gives you a gift, you give them a gift back.
It's a Japanese thing too.
Yes, exactly. By the way, I posted a thing on my Facebook this weekend, and it's the Japanese philosophy of wabi sabi. Have you ever heard that?
I've heard it. If this has to do with like, go ahead and expound. I sound
Yes,
familiar.
it's the art of finding the perfection in the imperfections. I first ran across this Japanese sculptor like back in the 90s, and one of his main philosophies was the art is in the imperfections. So he never did a pot that he like tried to like make to this clinical perfection stage. He would always put some divot or like make something in it that would break that like strict, okay, now it's absolutely perfect. And I adopted that. I was doing a series of paintings, kind of like Roger Dean-esque watercolors that were, I had just gotten a whole set of angel crystal balls and was doing paintings about angels and stuff at that time. And so I finished up all these watercolors. It was a big burst of creativity. And I decided that I needed to like take the corners and tear pieces off of them and make them look damaged. And I've done that like with everything I've done ever since then. And, I just loaded up that link on my light painting website. If you're interested, you might go and
Oh, that
check
stuff
it
looks
out.
awesome.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm having the best freaking time with that. I can't even begin to tell you. And I've gotten really big into that. It's a really big community, and there are like 5 or 6 guys. I did a little. I've got a whole like YouTube tutorial section on how to do different techniques and stuff in it. But one of the first videos was my light painting inspirations, and I showed a couple of examples, named those guys, and told why I was really into their styles. And over the last like 4 days, I've gotten like 500 like light painting friends, and just seen this most amazing work. And the coolest thing is I've gotten to connect with all of those guys that were my inspirations. So I'm just having the best time.
Manifestation win.
Communicating with them, yeah, and sharing and doing the challenges. And that I mentioned earlier that I've painted for a long time, and my other discipline is photography, and I've always kind of brought a painterly mindset to my photography. Like I do a lot of super tight macro stuff, so the backgrounds do that bokeh blur out thing, and it really is kind of like when you plan for that, it's like doing a painted background for stuff. But they were always 2 separate things, and the light painting is just so joyous and blissful because I'm back to actually pushing color around like physically and making shapes and drawing characters, but I'm doing it with physical light. Oh man, just amazing. And you're in a dark space, and you go and you draw this thing, go and look at the images, those surprises that you get. It's like I have a really good idea what I'm going to get, but so many times I look at it and just go, oh my God, where did that come from, man? It's just so cool. And doing my abstract stuff, I've got this my longtime apprentice and cohort and friend, and found he's an amazing landscape architect, and he ran across this string of LED lights that's meant to go out in a garden, and it's long. It's like 30 feet long. So I've been doing stuff, just spinning that and swirling that and making shapes with that, and it's kind of like the Polaroid in the mirror thing. I've been getting so many messages. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do a whole new deck using those images, and they're just the same way you saw all kinds of things manifest into smoke. It's kind of the same way with this light painting technique for these abstract things. Really, really, really dope. I'm enjoying it beyond words. Yeah,
I think that's the point, right? As Raphael might point out with Wyzard, you're following your highest excitement, and you don't have a whole lot of expectations. So here it's cracking hard.
The other thing about photography that I discovered, we were talking about, connecting creativity to exploration of magic. When I was first, like a week or two had cracked the spinning the rod thing, and I love keeping a visual photographic record of my magical explorations. So I set up my little spinning rig, and I'm going, okay, this is really cool. I had no intent of pushing it or making it move, but I realized that as I'm looking through the camera, I'd been shooting stuff, film and photography for so long that once my eye went into the eyepiece, and now I'm just looking with that one visual area, and you've kind of carved out this area, everything else kind of goes away, and that becomes like this physical world that you can affect stuff in. And I was sitting here,
the zone.
I was getting all focused. I'm focusing in, looking on at the rod, and I was good. I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be cool if that thing spun? And man, it took off. Whoa! So I realized that in that space, I had already kind of trained my mind and my energy to be in anything is possible, because there's nothing you can't film, there's nothing you can't construct in one way or another in the camera and in an image, and that rejection of impossibility carried over into that. So now I try to use that world as a window into the projective world of magic specifically. It's been a very useful tool. I throw that out to you and to experiment with and see if you have any goodness with
results. I think, yeah, you're showing me there's a lot of ways to practice methods, but I think the trick is to hold on loosely. Maybe if you want to, I don't know, I gotta go soon, but if you want to tell me what you're thinking in terms of like, how tightly do you hold on to expectation and ambition versus letting it flow? It seems like you got to create the conditions for the, kind of like the music theories. Like, yes, that takes intention, will, sacrifice, even all this stuff. And then at some point you kind of back off that and it like flows.
I've got a good example of that. I directed commercials for advertising for many, many, many years. And my mindset for that, by the time a commercial gets to being shot, it's like a storyboard that has been through multiple meetings, and client changes and the agency changes it. So by the time you're seeing those visuals that need to be reproduced, it's pretty much written in stone. So I would always get as prepared as I could possibly get to make those things happen as quickly as they could. And once that was in the can, then then it's like, let go and just go and see what you get. And you prepare yourself for miracles. And such a huge percentage of the time, those things were better than what everybody had thought it should be up front
or expected.
Yeah,
it seems like once you get to a certain point of ambition or will or whatever, like you're saying, it's kind of like relinquishing and trusting the universe to do what you to respond properly to your input. So once you do a bunch of input towards a focal point, then you kind of let go, and there's going to be enough momentum to keep that flow going.
Yeah, but if your intent isn't really strong and focused at the beginning, then you're probably not going to get very close to that. And if that doesn't matter, that's okay. But if you're trying to actually accomplish something, a really strong intent and focus on that outcome, maybe not necessarily how it manifests, but what you're wanting to manifest, is a good way to roll.
Reminds me of Michelangelo. It's like, I see that shit in that marble. You guys are idiots. You don't see it. I see it. I'm going to get it.
Yeah. Wasn't it Rodin that said, I'm just removing all of the stone that doesn't belong?
I think it was Michelangelo, but that's why I mentioned it. Neither here nor there. I got to get going. But dude, it's been a real pleasure hearing all this. I don't know if you guys are going to keep talking or not. Where were you guys at?
Well, I've kind of finished up my wrap on practitioners and magic, unless there's some questions to expound on.
No, I've asked them as I went.
I think we're good to conclude for now, and we're gonna just pick up next time.
Awesome. Enjoyed you. Thank you so much for showing up. I know you got up early out there, and appreciate.
Oh, I got up way earlier. I talked to my girlfriend, and then I was like, "All right, time to go to work or whatever." This was a lot of fun.
Appreciate you playing, man. Welcome anytime.
Definitely, and I want to talk to you about some specific things. So after this, let's talk for a second, debrief, and then I'll bounce.
Cool.
All right, then, perfect. Thank you both so much. Thank you all for listening. Obviously, I enjoyed you conversing, Bryan, enlightening and proficient, detailed, magical as always. Thank you once again. And yeah, enjoy yourself. Catch y'all next time.
Thank you.
Radio Okitalk.